it's knackering recruitment. We're seeing, job applications open and being flooded by 300 to 500 CVs, and it's like, how can you effectively screen them? Well, you could use AI to screen them, but that's also subject to some of the biases and challenges. So there's not a perfect solution, of course, but I do worry about what it's doing to the talent pool and making sure the right people can be seen.
Welcome to Tech Talks, hosted by myself, David Savage, and powered by Nash Squared. On today's podcast, my guest is the CTO of Genio, Josh Nesbitt, who is also one of the contributors to our upcoming film, which will be out on Monday for you to watch. So look, it ties into that. He's got a huge amount of interesting stuff to say about early careers, about AI skills, about how they're thinking about AI and skills and careers, and what it's doing to organizations. So really interesting to have him on the show today. Sam, you have never had to write a CV for a job? Did I look at a CV when I hired you?
I think so.
Did I?
No, I was
a
one
recommendation referral. So
yeah, that sort of thing. I've got one, and I've definitely rewritten it over the years, kept it up to date, so on and so forth. And then I've had a couple jobs through uni and things like that, but yeah, not for this one. I don't know what you're about to tell me. Scary.
I've got news for you. According to Business Insider, it's rest in peace resumes. Slop is killing the resume, and job hunters are scrambling for new ways to stand out. And also in the Times, the cover letter is dead. Here's how to get hired without one. These are articles and headlines from just the last couple of days. This ties in beautifully because I asked Josh what we're not talking about, what we should be talking about, and he goes, as you've just seen, dear listener, watcher, depending on whether you're on a Spotify or YouTube, you can watch this as well. Josh says that basically AI is killing recruitment. And, they now get flooded with 300, 500 CVs. AI makes them all look wonderful, and it makes it very hard for a good candidate to stand out. It's killing diversity and inclusion and belonging.
Yep.
In his view. And look, just last Thursday rather, I was in Leeds for the first screening of this film to an audience of about 60 people at Mills and Reeve. And one of my fellow panelists there, Hannah, works at Lloyd's, and she talks about the fact that when she interviews people, you can see that someone is just reading off a screen and probably using AI to help them answer questions. Slop, AI is a real problem when it comes to finding candidates and also in genuine candidates standing out.
Yeah, I've seen this quote unquote as a joke, on reels and things on Instagram of people having on a remote interview having another screen up helping them answer the questions. I didn't really know that actually really was happening.
Oh, it's happening.
That's really scary. I think also it's tricky as well because AI obviously can really help level the playing field. There's lots of people that aren't from, I'm from an arts and humanities background, so writing comes very easily to me. I can very easily put my skill set down and into words quite easily, and obviously AI can help a lot of people that maybe have more technical abilities that don't include writing and things, and help them put down what their skills are and convey and articulate their skills. But obviously it's also kind of flattening the playing field a little bit and kind of making it difficult to really pinpoint who you're looking for, because it makes everyone kind of seem equally qualified when maybe that
or also maybe not. Maybe if you're not very good at using ChatGPT, and part of me thinks that if you're using ChatGPT or whatever, Claude, to help you write your resume, maybe you're not qualified for the job as much as you might be, or say you are.
Yeah,
right? In some instances, I get what you're saying, by the way. But is it the kind of candidate who won't realize that it's also just word salad?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we're still, thankfully, and probably will always be, maybe that's a stretch, but I think we'll always be in an industry or live in a world where there will always be an in-person, or at least by some description, in-person, face-to-face, whatever you want to say, like interview, part of the interview process, which I think should weed them out. I know we're having that issue with remote interviews and people
Yep.
reading off a screen, but in person, that sort of, you can't hide and that should really always be the case. I guess I was I was just trying to think when you were saying that, how we fix it and how
No,
we
yeah,
make
yeah.
sure there's a part of the process that stops that from happening.
I think it's quite interesting. Business Insider reference Expensify. So we've had Expensify on the podcast
Sure.
before. Apparently this is off their website. Resume not your thing. That's great. We don't read them anyway. Reads a job post for an engineer at Expensify. Whilst we know you're awesome, it's actually really hard and time consuming to find you in the midst of literally hundreds of other applicants we get from everywhere else. The post goes on to list 5 question applications. 5 questions that applicants should answer to be considered.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you could use AI to answer those, I guess, if it's
Sure,
remote.
yeah,
But
I was thinking that actually
it's allowing
that a lot of interview processes have more starting to have more specific. It's less of a like, give your CV and a cover letter, but they will actually ask you specific questions about the role.
And I'm kind of on board with that, because just listing companies and experience in a CV style format is no real predictor for success in a role.
Yeah,
and I can say that with absolute clarity, as having been a hands-on recruiter for 8 years earlier in my career. Contractors, they could be a useful guide in terms of helping kind of sort through applicants. But the amount of times you place people who actually on paper might not have appeared the most obvious fit, and then ended up being brilliant for the job,
Well, it can go both ways, right? You can look great on paper, not be, and then vice versa. So having and I think it's individual to each industry and also individual to each business, how they go about that. If you're looking for someone that's in a lot more of a like role that I'm in, for example, you might want a more face-to-face, you might want a more cultural fit versus someone that's going to a very technical role. Maybe they just need to have, and we've spoken about that before, about like technical ability and so on and so forth. It is interesting. It's something that will keep developing, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, look, it's just one component of today's interview, which we will now get stuck into with Josh. As I say, he's a contributor on the film, so when that's out on Monday, why don't you go and see what he's had to say alongside some other interesting talking heads all about this topic. But yeah, enjoy today's interview. So joining me on today's podcast is Josh, CTO at Genio. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Yeah, very busy at the moment, but very good, thank you.
Good. Is it sunny in Leeds? Because after a terrible start to the year weather-wise, I'm looking out at bright blue skies currently out my window, and it's a lovely relief, especially when it's been kind of nose to the grindstone and non-stop work-wise.
It's been giving me life, honestly. I went for a walk with the dog yesterday, and having just sun to like soak up has been amazing. So yeah, I'm welcoming this weather for sure.
Good. Well, look, it's lovely to catch up with you. The reason that we're talking to you is we featured you quite heavily in our latest documentary. We talk about tech flicks on Tech Talks a fair amount. The documentary is being released on the 9th of March on YouTube for anyone to go and watch. But I appreciate that a lot of our listeners won't be familiar with you. They haven't as yet had a chance to see that documentary, and they may not know who Genio are, or even where Leeds is, to be perfectly honest, given that we've got listeners in Kyrgyzstan and Ghana and Chile. So let's start with who Genio are, Josh.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on the TechFlix doc as well. It was a pleasure being involved. So yeah, I'm Josh, CTO at Genio. We're based in Leeds, UK. So that's the north of England. If you're not familiar with it, the north is significantly better than the south. If you're having a conversation with someone from London, that's for sure.
I might live down here, Josh, but I am from Newcastle. You don't have to persuade me.
I was hoping to spark a fierce debate, but no, there's always
you've got someone who's brought absolutely on board with you there.
I was hoping the accent would come out there. No, yes, but no, there's always a bit of friendly competition.
Yeah.
But no, yeah. So Genio sort of mission is to unlock better learning for everyone, and essentially we build tools, communities, and services that just allow people to learn in a way that really makes sense to them and to become that sort of lifelong learning companion. We work a lot with learners and institutions on trying to make that happen. So yeah, it was a pleasure sort of talking through that as part of the documentary. We talked a lot about how AI is really impacting education and how it's just completely shaking things up for the better and for the worse in a lot of respects.
You mentioned the word community, and I know that we're joking a little bit about North and South divide there. I have spent my entire working life in and around London, but I grew up in a pretty deprived part of the country, an ex-coal mining community in southeast Northumberland, where opportunities aren't immediately apparent, I think, to kids. Even now, I went back to my school about a year ago and did a podcast with the assistant head talking about how they're utilising AI in the classroom there. How ingrained to the community are you in Leeds, and what are the challenges that a regional city like that faces when you are, not that Leeds isn't a hub, but a little bit further away from somewhere like London, which is an immediate kind of global centre?
Yeah, it's I didn't know you from Northumberland actually. I was there this weekend doing a half marathon trail run along the beautiful coastline. So
I'm doing a trail run up by Bamburgh in the summer. So there you go.
That's exactly where it was. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Was it Endurance Life?
It was, yes. It was.
I've done that one before. It's stunning. This could go in a very different direction. We'll get back on question.
I apologise. We digress. Yeah. So the Leeds community is very important to Genio. I'm very interested in communities. I run conferences and events for the tech community, but Genio as well are very keen to contribute to the Leeds community. We talk to the Leeds Digital Festival in the documentary, and also just Leeds Digital as a whole is an amazing thing for the city. I think it's really interesting. We were talking about on a recent version of the podcast I run around the Lovelace Labs and the next location for Lovelace Labs, and where that should be in the north or more further around the sort of London area, and why we should focus outside of London to sort of represent the country really. And I think it's always hard, the north south divide in terms of where gets the funding, where gets the support, where gets the spotlight. Has always been a bit of a challenge, but I do think that's shifting quite significantly. Thanks to things like your documentary too. So yeah, I think community is a big part of that.
It's funny because it's one of those things that feels like we're being quite insular and talking about the UK in a way that perhaps other people feel excluded from that conversation. But then if I think about France, right, you have exactly the same thing in reverse, except the north is the south and the south is the north. You've got Paris in the north of the country and the south of the country feels economically deprived. How does AI skills perhaps help in that regard? Because I suppose increasingly technology's had this influence that, you can work remotely, you can, there's greater access to opportunity. Is AI accelerating that?
I do think there's a leveling up aspect of it for sure. I do think it makes sort of learning and access to some of those skills a lot easier. But I do think there's still at the moment, a financial constraint. I mean, if you're trying to adopt, Claude Enterprise for your company, for example, to try and engineer with AI, it's still a relatively expensive thing to procure for a company. So it depends on what sort of size company you're working in and how you're trying to use it. So I don't know. I think there's still a few challenges to it. I think it is. Claude's definitely winning the battle over OpenAI, for example, at the moment in terms of effectiveness of that tool for coding, for security, for productivity, at least from my perspective. And to sort of buy that in for yourself versus your company buying it's a relatively expensive thing to focus on.
Now, one thing that I do want to touch on quickly is entry-level roles. It's something that we talk about a lot in the film. I've had plenty of conversations since we recorded that. Funnily enough, with my cousin and his girlfriend, who've just come out of university, and his girlfriend, she's come out of York University, a first degree in biochem, and her experience and the experience of her friends applying for biochemistry, tech, kind of hybrid jobs is having to apply for hundreds of jobs just to get a foot in the door. And they're feeling like there's more competition and fewer opportunities due to the direction of travel generally in the labour market at the minute. And the feeling that is being accelerated by AI. Is that something that you think is fair as a reflection of the technology industry as a whole? And what are Genio doing about that? Because in the film, and I would urge people to watch it, you talk very strongly about the fact that actually you're trying to go against the grain and make sure there are opportunities for people in junior roles.
Yeah, I think there's definitely this sort of notion of AI first engineers, right? AI native developers essentially emerging from this next wave of like people coming into the industry, and I think you know there are some things that haven't changed in terms of 20 years ago when I was at university, I was still using programming languages that we were not known by the university. There were languages that were not on the curriculum, and I was advised against using them. And while that's different from AI, at university, I think the pace of technology has always been a lot speedier than what a lot of traditional education can keep up with. So there's an element of that self-taught, self-learning, self-investment that needs to happen. And I think it's probably no different with AI. Ultimately, you've got to figure out how you're going to use it to amplify your skill set, amplify what you're capable of. And it does sadly mean that the barriers are a bit lower sometimes for things like applying for job interviews and sounding really credible on paper. I think it does put more strain on the staged interview process and how you bring talent into the company. So we focus very heavily on the sort of initial screening process, but also that first stage interview, like speaking to another human and to understand what drives them and understand how they want to use AI to augment their skills is really important. And also that they understand the sort of power of the technology. So we talk a lot at Genio about productive and unproductive friction. For the learning process, productive friction is really important. That sort of challenge of learning something is really important to embedding that information. But there's loads of areas where we have unproductive friction, which is waste in the process, that we can automate and we can ensure that it sort of frees that person up to learn in a way that makes sense to them.
Obviously, as a CTO, I'm assuming you're someone who is keen to experiment with the technology, and you talked obviously before about Gemini and OpenAI, and you're across what these tools do. Do you think is that as easy to replicate in your head of marketing, in your head of finance? Increasingly, people outside of traditional technology roles who are using AI might be going, "Oh, this can do X, Y, Z for us," but not necessarily saying it from a point of view of being as literate across those digital skills as you, and making sure that they understand the risks and the capabilities is possibly even more important with them than someone like yourself.
Yeah, I think it's always going to be a case where you hire smart people and they'll figure out really good solutions to problems, right? And I think the amazing thing that a lot of the configuration for AI, like I think the amazing thing is it's all in Markdown. Like it's all in a common format that people can understand. They can author themselves. Of course, if you start writing, deeper Claude skills that run scripts and do other things, there's a more technical aspect to it. But I think ultimately the way that you configure these tools is quite consistent and it's quite approachable. Obviously, mastery is still a concern. Like you still have to sort of dig into many hours of experimentation and understanding how these tools really can be optimized. But we have a bunch of smart people in those heads of roles who are really throwing themselves into these tools, really sharing experiences. I think internally we have a very strong culture of sharing when something's really working or isn't, how we can automate, how we can use agents, how we can basically amplify the work that we're doing with these tools. So I think it's much more about the internal culture of sharing and learning than it is about, that's a marketing role, therefore that's not a tool that we use. We're not seeing that here. And I think a lot of the other agencies that I'm speaking to around the UK aren't really seeing that either. It's really understanding that unlock that it gives your company and really throwing some serious hours into making it work is what I'm seeing.
It's interesting because we've had Coursera on the podcast recently, and they were talking about the fact that they've seen a 185% rise in the level of demand for human interpersonal skills. You're talking about the ability for junior people to talk to other people and then to collaborate at a senior level, and I assume that's exactly the same at a junior level, to kind of talk about best practice. That is a little bit different to the traditional skill set that we think of when we think about the stereotyped developer. So what is that doing in terms of the type of skill set, the type of person that you're looking for an engineer versus what you might have been looking for 5 years ago? And what does that mean for people who are actively looking to pursue careers in that role?
Yeah, so I think there is still a technical aspect to it. So you're still very much understanding, does this person can they articulate the architecture of a system? Can they understand the security standards? Can they understand, how we would commit to accessibility compliance and how we would build with, a very inclusive, accessible mindset, putting the learner first. And there's lots of things still very technical, but it's less about handwriting the code than it used to be. It used to be very heavily focused on, let's do a technical test. Let's see you put together, a function that does this, or, pull together a UI that does this. And that's changed a bit now. I do think the soft skills are really important. Soft skills are what make us human, and I think that it's really important that you have a really good blend of soft skills and those sort of wider architectural technical skills that help you build systems at scale. Accessibility is a big thing for us at Genio, and I think this is something that's going to be really difficult for us to fully automate. Really doing that testing with learners to understand how people interact with your tools and where they're going to really struggle to achieve the goal that they're trying to achieve through a notes taking product, or any sort of product really. So yeah, I think it just puts more emphasis on, like, do you understand the problem you're trying to solve? Can you scope those requirements properly? Can you deliver something that really works for that person?
And what about your own role? Kind of, what impact is it having on the role of a CTO as increasingly skills become AI driven or AI first across an organization? There's a lot of pressure on digital and technology leaders at the minute from boards. There's that worry about FOMO and making sure that these tools are implemented in an organization so that they don't miss out. But at the same time, there's a lot of projects that aren't quite landing despite the level of investment. What's it doing to the role of a CTO at the minute in terms of the challenges that you face?
There's definitely, the initial launch of AI more publicly was seen as a driver of automation, of productivity, of efficiency, and I think that is still a topic that board level sort of audiences are very interested in. I think the important thing is to sort of think about how you steer the ship in those moments, right? How you prove that, okay, we are adopting AI at a reasonable pace, and this is what we consider a reasonable pace based on the context of which our company operates within. There's a reason why we can't just throw money at AI tooling and assume that everyone will just get on with it. There is a cultural sort of adoption of these tools, a mindset that needs to be shifted within sort of the workforce, and it's really how you support that transformation within the organization. I guess in a lot of ways, it's no different than a digital transformation 20 years ago, but
Yeah.
it is, because the speed at which it's progressing is insane. And, the speed at which these tools are becoming more effective is just crazy. Claude launched last week this new sort of set of security tools to allow you to basically have, a whole army of agents who are working on, who are
Synthetic
working
people.
on. Yeah, exactly. I'm falling into the sort of the robot mindset. But yeah, no, it's just interesting to see how fast it's progressing. But I think it's the same skills that the CTOs ever needed in terms of how they manage that board level pressure, how they demonstrate progress, and how they ensure that we're not just doing things for the optics, and we're doing it because they are actually making a material impact on how we work and how we deliver.
Yeah. Look, predictions are always a bit of a fool's game, right? That said, we've talked there about the pace of change and how that's impacting careers up and down an organization, or job functions rather, up and down an organization. If there were one or two hard skills and one or two soft skills that you really think are going to come to the fore in the next 1 to 2 years for people, where they should be thinking about, right, do I have capabilities in this area? What do you think they might be?
I think hard skills wise, focusing on this new standard of skills that are emerging. So skills within AI tools where you can basically create very specific sort of context for agents to do work for you. So whether it's a sort of skill that helps your productivity, like planning your day, or whether it's something that sits inside of a pipeline and detects sort of failures within tests or something like that. I think this sort of skill-based standard is starting to become really important. It looks like it might even supersede MCP as a technical skill. So that's one thing I think needs to be sort of focused on over the next year at least, to see how individuals can take sort of advantage of that. the soft skills remain the same. Like ultimately, can you understand the problem? Can you articulate it? Can you speak to the customer or the user and really understand if the thing that you're building is working and if it's right for the market, right? If the market's going to receive what you're building in the right way. So yeah, I think soft skills wise, although some of those could be hard skills as well, I think it's just understanding the problem and being able to engage with the problem in a very human way remains important.
And one last quick question. I love asking this of guests. You find yourself in rooms full of your peers. You go to community events in and around the city and beyond. What are the conversations that you don't hear as often that you think we should talk about a little bit more as an industry?
It's knackering recruitment is what I think is what I'm seeing in a few ways. Like it's creating a really saturated market of CVs of it's sort of causing real problems, I think, in the sort of DEIB space, and we're struggling to make sure that the sort of the right people are getting through to the right stage of interviews. I think I'm still quite concerned about what it's doing to diversity in our industry, actually. Now, maybe it's just some of the things that we've seen coming through the doors lately, but I really worry about what it's doing to making sure that people who are super skilled, super passionate are getting seen by the right companies. Because you're seeing, job applications open and being flooded by 300 to 500 CVs, and it's like, how can you effectively screen them? Well, you could use AI to screen them, but that's also subject to similar biases and challenges. So there's not a perfect solution, of course, but I do worry about what it's doing to the talent pool and making sure the right people can be seen. I don't think it's being talked about enough.
Well, look, it's been a pleasure to catch up with you. Thank you very much for your time. And I will see you at our first screening of the film tomorrow.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Tech Talks is hosted and edited by David Savage. It is produced by Nash Squared. And we have special thanks to Lemsey for supplying music to this show.